Hi everyone, my name is Carla and I make videos on corporate soft skills, project management skills, really any kind of skills that help us survive this corporate society that we live in. Today, I wanted to do a video on the books that I've read that have helped me throughout my career as I continue to grow into a project manager and leader in my industry. The three books that I've read this year, which are the ones that I'm going to concentrate on today, we're going to start with Brave, Not Perfect, The Making of a Manager, and Naked at Work. So starting off with the first book called Brave, Not Perfect by Reshma Saujani. She is actually the founder of Girls Who Code, and she also is the first Indian American woman to run for U.S. Congress. She didn't get elected, but she talks about that a lot in this book. I love this book. I just got it over winter break. One of my mentors and friends gave it to me, and she has this little inscription. It says, "To one brave woman." Being in the male-dominated industry that I'm in, it is very difficult to find female mentors. I've been very lucky to have had several amazing women mentors. The person who gave me this, I am constantly inspired by her. She is so ferociously and unapologetically herself. So this book touches a topic that I am very familiar with for myself, which is kind of this idea that we as a society kind of mold little girls into these perfect little women that are supposed to be polite and polished, and we motivate them to go towards something that they are, naturally good at because we see them as fragile and we want to protect them and we want them to succeed in this kind of protected environment that we put them in. So little girls grow up with this overpowering need to please others and be perfect, which sounds like a good thing. However, it inhibits them from being brave and reaching for, extravagant goals or dreams that they might have, versus little boys whom we provide the environment to fall and fail and tell them to, man up, get back up, you're going to be fine, sort of thing. And we basically teach them how to be brave from a very, very young age. That is an extreme overgeneralization, but that's what this book talks about. And it is something that I experienced myself. So I completely related to this book, and it was a great read because it talks about how devastating perfectionism can be for one person, how much stress it can put on someone, how it can prevent you from reaching for, those stretch goals that you want to do, or, it makes you kind of become over analytical, overly prepared, and puts you a step behind because you're always afraid to take that next step because you want it to be perfect. When you're perfectly prepared to take that step, you want to take it. It also talks about how this is further kind of ingrained nowadays with social media and how social media portrays this kind of very perfect, aesthetically pleasing girl in several accounts of the influencers that are surrounding our young ones. It talks about how this strive to be perfect kind of helps us in school, right? But it's never going to help us in the real world. Once you're out in the real world, playing nice and being perfect doesn't help you get promotions. It doesn't help you get raises. And so that's why it is so important to break our mold of being this perfect kind of woman that you were bred to be into a brave person, and how to kind of shift your mindset into accepting failure and accepting that it's okay not to be perfect. She doesn't just talk about why it's important to do that and kind of analyzes the way that society treats women, but she really goes into detail about how you can move yourself towards being braver and what are the specific actions that you can take in order to be braver in your own life. Obviously, you can read the book and you can find the full list on what she thinks is a good way to break out of your mindset and become a braver version of yourself. But some of my favorite ones are surrounding yourself with rejection. That is something that I live by, and I actually really, I've given that advice myself, where it's like you have to be rejected often, and you have to get to a point where you are okay with rejection in order to move forward and keep trying the things that you want to do and not be deterred from a rejection, not taking it to heart, this rejection. And, maybe grieving a failure or a rejection and then moving on and then trying again. The other one that I love that she kind of touches upon, but I like to rephrase it a little bit, is what's the worst thing that could happen? What is the worst thing that could happen of you making that change in your career, or you asking for that promotion, or you asking for more responsibilities to get closer to a leadership position and do so unapologetically? The worst thing that could happen is you don't get the raise, you don't get the promotion, and you figure out a different way to achieve the goal that you're trying to go after. I also really like this book because it talks a lot about self-care, being healthy, having enough sleep, getting exercise, and meditating, and how all of these things are pillars to you being strong enough to go after what you want, and keeping, I guess the way she says it is keeping your tank full in order to be able to be brave. So I really love this book. I received it in such a perfect time because I was switching jobs, and it was exactly what I needed at that moment because, anxiety, doubts, self-doubts. The fact that I had been brave once when I made the decision to change jobs was kind of scaring me and filling me with doubts. And when I read this book, it really kind of quieted down those voices in the back of my head. It almost gave me permission to continue to be brave and thrust forward with the decisions that I made and feel good about those decisions. So definitely recommend it. The next book I read last year, definitely bought this right before I started my job, my new job, because I had a lot of free time and I was able to read. Clearly because I read several books and I haven't opened a book since, so. So this one's by Julie Zhuo, or Zhuo. She's a designer. She's like program designer, product designer. She started right out of college on Facebook when it was just a startup. And she talks about her journey from becoming a designer to becoming a manager. But this book is basically like Management 101. So she talks a lot about what type of manager you're going to be. She talks about what the role of a manager really is and what those responsibilities are, like setting up processes for smooth and efficient work, supporting career goals of those people in your team, building a team that works well together and communicates well together. And so it's less about project managing and more about managing people and managing full teams. But it's still good as a project manager to have those skills. And then eventually, if you do want to go into managing as a corporate manager, great kind of like factual analysis of what a manager does. However, I do have a favorite chapter, and that's chapter 8, and it's called How to Make Things Happen, or Making Things Happen. I love this chapter because she talks about the strategy of how to get something accomplished, which is basically what a project manager does. It's a very short chapter because then she goes back into talking about managing people and how that strategy can be implemented in a corporate setting. However, I loved it because it was everything that I was thinking as a project manager, but I couldn't get it into words or how to describe it or how to get me to the next step. And I loved it because she just put a little, compiled little perfect list that I literally wrote in my notes, and it's super concise, but it's very effective. And, obviously you can mold it for what you do, but I really liked her strategy on how to make things happen. She includes things like how to set a concrete vision, how to set up a realistic game plan or strategy, if you want to call it a strategy. And she also talks about how to define responsibilities as it helps with accountability and getting things done. She also talks about how to break bigger projects into smaller tasks. She also has this section on how it is more important to have a perfect execution versus a perfect strategy. Directly from the book, it's about how the best plan could mean nothing if you're not executing it quickly and well enough to actually make it matter with how quickly things move nowadays, right? So I'm just going to run through those tools that she uses. And so the first one is obviously creating a list of projects and tasks in order of priority. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The next one is establishing a efficient process of decision making. I find this to be so critical in my projects because we have so many stakeholders in our infrastructure projects. It is so important to figure out a process on how decisions are going to be made with the client that's funding it and is going to own it, but also all the stakeholders that are involved, and whether we're within the right of way and how they need to provide their input in order to make those decisions. So I always feel like that is one of the hardest things to implement, but also one of the most important things. And so back to that whole, it's important to have a perfect execution versus a perfect strategy. And that's because you want to move forward with a reasonable decision where perhaps you don't have all the information that you need, but then once you figure out what works and what doesn't work, you adjust for it. She has this quote from the evil Jeff Bezos. Basically, he says that you should be making decisions off of 70% of the information you need versus 90% of the information. Otherwise, if you're waiting for 90% of the information, you're moving too slow. And this is so true. I've definitely experienced that in my industry where I would love to have all the information available for me to just go and design a project, right? I would love to know where every single utility is and how deep it is. And I would love to know the, exact elevations of the bridge that we're going to cross or go under from. But that's not how the world works. Getting utility information, getting as-built takes time and money and energy. And sometimes it is not only more efficient, but it saves money to figure things out in the field versus spending a lot of money figuring out where everything is to the 100th decimal, right? So most of the time it's better to move forward with incomplete information and making reasonable decisions based on experience rather than waiting to have 100% of the information available. Her next piece of advice is that after a decision is made, everyone commits to it fully. If there's no new information, then there's really no reason into second guessing these decisions and continue to discuss and delaying any work that could be progressed. Once new information comes in, however, she talks about expediting, making the process quicker to review the new information and examine whether it's going to impact the decisions that you've made and need to adjust for them. Her next piece of advice is that every single task should have a who and a when. Big deal. Huge deal. So I've definitely experienced where we have action items and something didn't get assigned to a responsible person. And that action item is basically just floating around and nobody is accountable for it. So yeah, I definitely recommend this book. It's a little factual. So it was hard to kind of read through it because it was almost like I was reading a textbook up until the end. And I think I also skipped a couple or just like skimmed a couple of them because it didn't feel like it was applicable to me. They were definitely more catered towards, the corporate manager and not really the project manager, except for that chapter on strategy, which I am basically just kind of want to rip it out and post it on my desk. The next book that I read is called Naked at Work by Danessa Knaupp. She is an executive leadership coach, and she used to be a CEO, an entrepreneur, and a Fortune 100 senior leader. This one also has a little inscription in it. It says, "To Carla, here's to great lessons, rich failures, and spectacular successes." I love it. I actually have two of these books. This one I kept, and it's brand new, so you can kind of, it looks like I didn't read it, but the one that I did read, I'm giving away, and I'm actually giving it to one of my mentors because this book is really catered towards the executive leadership, like the CEO, the director, the vice president, those kind of people, not really the mid-level manager or project manager. Naked at Work, obviously a metaphor, and I think it's pretty clear what it references to. It talks about being authentic, being your truest self at work. That is a philosophy that I lived so ferociously by, almost to a detriment when I was younger. I really wish I had had this book. It would have helped that unfiltered young Carla so much avoid a lot of the trouble that she got herself in. It talks about how to be authentic, how to know yourself, and how to embrace that person to bring that person to work in a very polished manner. So great book. She has a section on shame, which Brene Brown has multiple talks on. But my favorite part is probably from the middle on, where she actually starts talking about why it's important to be authentic and how it makes you a better leader. So she talks about how being naked at work or being your authentic self at work is not about being liked. It's about creating these high-performing teams and delivering powerful results at work. How much energy people put into hiding away their humanity, kind of disguising themselves and putting up this like front at work or this mask at work, and how important it is, or how much better it is for everyone to not invest that energy into that, but rather invest it into the work that you're doing. And how when you become human at work, and how when you bring candor and compassion to work, it drives efficiency by getting rid of all that time that teams put into basically managing their collective humanity. So I really like it. It's a philosophy that I actually am 100% behind. And it's something that I've done since the beginning of my career, is really bring myself to work. And when I do try to mask, because I'm trying to be the immaculate professional that I want to be, I end up not doing as good of a job as I could have been doing. And in a space where I do need to bring up the mask because my authenticity is not embraced or welcomed, it's probably a team that I shouldn't be a part of. And that's something that I've learned very quickly in my career. She talks about a lot more than that, but that was my favorite part about this book. So also definitely 100% recommend it. Okay. So those are the 3 books that I actually read this year on leadership, project managing, and just managing in general. I like to read a couple of leadership books, managing books a year, because otherwise I'm just winging it and probably not doing the best job that I can, versus people who've already cracked the code or hacked it, and I could learn a lot from them. Those are my book recommendations, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.